How big of a lie, or perhaps better put, what kind of lie has to be told before a judge will revisit a settlement agreement? Well, up until last week, you needed a whopper, and then along came Brubaker. Thanks for dropping by. As always, my best and, well, my only metric for knowing which topics you're interested in is that discreet like, PM, or subscribe. YouTube doesn't pay me, but your feedback does help shape future videos. Now, today's commentary is all about undoing judgments because the other side lied, or maybe better stated, engaged in some degree of, well, fraud. And the bar for undoing those judgments has always been, well, very, very high. For example, in 2011, the First District handed down Goldsmith, and my takeaway of that case, and I don't think I was the only one that thought this, was that once the parties waive discovery, you have to raise this gentleman from the dead if you wanted to file a 1401 alleging fraud. Now, if you're not a lawyer, or maybe you're new to 1401 petitions, that's the section that deals with revisiting judgments, including settlements that are over 30 days old. Now, if you don't know what that is, here's April with the cliff notes of that in less than 39 or so seconds.
Under 1401, the petitioner must plead specific facts, showing the existence of a meritorious claim, demonstrate due diligence in presenting the claim to the court in the original action, and act with due diligence in filing the 1401 petition. To vacate a judgment based on new evidence, the petitioner must show the evidence wasn't known to them at the time of the proceeding and couldn't have been discovered with reasonable diligence. Fraudulent concealment of evidence is a factor in determining whether the moving party exercised due diligence in discovering and presenting the ground for relief. Courts apply Section 1401 with the aim of achieving justice, but it isn't intended to give a litigant a new opportunity to do that which should have been done in the earlier proceeding.
Prior to Brubaker, we relied off a case called Goldsmith, and the long story short in Goldsmith was that at prove up, the wife took the husband's good word that he had made a full disclosure of assets, and for the most part, he actually did, minus, well, three things. One, after the divorce, he filed an amended tax return for the year that the parties were still married, and that yielded him some pretty good money. Two, he got a settlement from litigation that arose from non-marital property, and three, he mischaracterized 300 grand as cash as opposed to stock that was worth 300,000. I think the inference was that the stock rose significantly in value after the divorce. So the Goldsmith wife later finds out about this, files a 1401 saying, hey, my ex should have disclosed all these things and I never would have agreed to the MSA had I known about it. In response, the other side files a motion for summary judgment. Crucial here, neither side in Goldsmith sought an evidentiary hearing, so the judge granted the motion for summary judgment against the wife based solely off of the pleadings and argument. And the appellate court in Goldsmith upheld the dismissal with this ominous warning.
A representation and warranty of full disclosure in a marital settlement agreement, even when the full disclosure is confirmed by affidavit, cannot be used as an escape hatch to avoid the consequences of failing to act diligently in the first instance by engaging in sufficient discovery, a proposition that has long been established in Illinois law.
Or simply stated, if you waive discovery and it turns out the ex had like a boat or a mansion or a dog, you can't come back to court claiming you were tricked into settling.
Goldsmith is cited everywhere, including this federal opinion. So for years, the idea was that if a party relied on informal discovery and it later turns out someone forgot to mention or clarify an asset in a settlement agreement, well, so sorry, so sad. Then along came Brubaker. Now, Brian Hurst and Ogle Allen, they're of Hurst, Robin, and Kay. They represented the appellant, that was the ex-husband, and they squared off against Stephen Klein and Catherine Weiler of Swanson, Martin, and Bell, who represented the ex-wife. The allegations in Brubaker strongly hint that a couple years before the actual divorce, the wife was maybe seeing another man. Through a shell company, she buys a condo in cash, never discloses it on her financial affidavit when the divorce was filed a couple years later. Parties are doing informal discovery, then enter an MSA, very similar to Goldsmith. Now, if she was seeing this guy on the side, it appears that relationship broke bad a few years later because this same gentleman goes up to the ex-husband and tells him, hey dude, your ex-wife has an $800,000 condo that you never knew about. So the ex-husband files a 1401 alleging fraud. The ex-wife files a motion for summary judgment saying, hey, Goldsmith, And the trial judge agrees with that and tosses the 1401 without, and this is important, giving the ex-husband an opportunity to put on evidence. The ex-husband appeals and the appellate court reverses, and they stress that Goldsmith was predicated on a failure of due diligence to ascertain what was in the marital estate, whereas in this case, the allegation was that the ex-wife made efforts to obtain and fraudulently conceal the condo. And they distinguish it from the Onishi Chang opinion, that was from a few years ago. That's where the wife signed an MSA, although she suspected the husband was being less than forthcoming on his assets. And when it later turned out she was right, her efforts to vacate were thwarted because she failed to act on those suspicions at the time of the original divorce. Whereas in Brubaker, it's argued the ex-husband had, well, no idea the condo ever existed until well after the divorce. Now, it's important to note, the appellate court doesn't rule the 1401 should have been granted, only that since fraud was specifically pled in the 1401 and it's a material issue that's in dispute, the summary judgment was improper and the matter should go back for an evidentiary hearing. So what does this all mean? Well, I think it has to satisfy the Clifford rule. It's something I just made up on the fly here, and it goes like this. If your ex buys a tiny poodle and hides it away, it's understandable you may never see it. But if they buy Clifford, the big red dog, well, that dog's got to go somewhere. If you just did a walkthrough of the property, I mean, you're going to see it. It's Clifford. In Goldsmith, the issues that weren't clarified or disclosed are like Clifford. If you had done a search of the property, you're going to find him. Brubaker, however, well, that's like a pet poodle kept in a secret dungeon. No amount of walking the property is going to yield it because the other side is making continued efforts to hide him. And to interject the Onishi Chang exception into this really weird analogy, if you didn't find Clifford during your walk of the property, but you did find some of Clifford's droppings, you just can't stand mute and play shocked years later when you find out your ex really did buy Clifford. It's not a perfect analogy, but I think it's a good rule of thumb for differentiating Goldsmith from Brubaker, and by all means, if someone has a better example, more power to you. Brubaker is a very fascinating case. I encourage anyone that's interested in 1401s to read the opinion when time permits. Anyways, that's all I have. Thanks for watching.